Let's move now on to producer surplus. So rather than purchasing textbooks, consider that these guys might be thinking about tutoring. So they're thinking about selling their tutoring services. So for sellers, suppliers, we have a similar concept called willingness to sell. So what is the minimum price? So for buyers, the willingness to pay is basically a maximum price. For sellers, there's a minimum price that they're willing to sell at called the willingness to sell, or WTS. Okay, so here are the three dudes' willingnesses to sell, and it's at an hourly rate. So Beanie really values his time, would only be willing to sell his tutoring services for no less than $30 an hour. Mitch and Frank have lower willingnesses to sell. And so, I might ask, which of these three students would be willing to tutor if the market price was $25 an hour? Well, the answer is that Mitch and Frank would be willing to tutor because they would be earning something higher than their minimum willingness to sell. But Beanie would not. He requires at least $30 an hour in order to be motivated to tutor. And since the market price is below that, he would not end up tutoring. So only Mitch and Frank will end up tutoring in this case. And so if we're to calculate their producer surpluses, here again, it's just the difference between price and willingness to sell. So just a difference again, just like consumer surplus. And so for Mitch, for example, he's willing to sell his tutoring services for $20 an hour at a minimum. And since he gets to earn $25 an hour at the market price, he's getting an extra $5 per hour, and that's his surplus is the $5. Frank, on the other hand, since his willingness to sell is even lower at $10 an hour, his surplus is the difference between 25 and 10, so 15. He's getting an extra $15 an hour, and that's his producer surplus per hour. And likewise, we can visualize this graphically. Again, it's a stepwise function. Looks like a staircase. And there you go. You've got Frank at the lowest willingness to sell, Mitch at the middle willingness to sell, and Beanie at the highest willingness to sell. All right. So if the price were $15 per hour, Frank would be the only one tutoring. And he would earn in excess of $5 per hour. So that's his producer surplus per hour is $5. If the price was $25 per hour, like in the original example, in that case, both Mitch and Frank would be willing to tutor. Frank would earn a whopping $15 an hour of surplus, producer surplus, and Mitch would earn $5 producer surplus. So you can kind of think of it as, for sellers, the excess of what it would cost them. So typically with supply, the minimum willingness to sell is basically the cost of production. So in this case, Frank, basically his opportunity cost would be $10 an hour. Mitch's opportunity cost would be $20 an hour. And so the producer surplus is what are they getting in excess over and above their opportunity cost or their production cost. And again, we can illustrate or represent producer surplus as an area. So it's the area that's above the supply curve and below market price, which in this case, in this example, is $25. So those light pink rectangles represent total market producer surplus. All right, so now that we know the basics of these two concepts, let's do a little practice. So the height of the demand curve at any given quantity can be thought of as the what? If you need to take a minute, pause the video to think about it, go ahead and do that. And I'll reveal the answer in the next video. Also think about this question. The difference between the price of the good, the difference between the price the good was sold at and the minimum price the firm was willing to accept is called what? All right, so I'll reveal the answer to these two questions in the next video.